especially I want you to talk about how you use podcasting and social media for your mission and how you really turned your profession of sports broadcasting into your passion and what you have done with this. And to give you all a little bit more background, I mean, I've known Brandon for a long time. I knew him when he came back to Cincinnati and started working at Channel 5. And as I mentioned to you in class, this was his dream job until it wasn't. And so just talk about, first of all, talk about your journey, talk about how you
Hmm.
got there. And then let's talk a little bit about how you used your broadcasting skills and really flipped them for your podcast, for your social posts, things
Yep.
like that, to really promote your passion and what you think, what you're turning into now, your mission, not just here locally, but really nationally. So, Brandon, I'll turn it over to you.
Sure. First off, I want to address the elephant in the room. This is just water. I'm sober. I don't drink, especially at 9:40. These are just the cups we have in our office. I'm sorry if that scared people at 9:30, although y'all are in college. Anyway, yeah, thanks so much, Betsy. I'm excited to meet y'all and talk to y'all. This is something that obviously is close to me because I was in your shoes 10 years ago, 11 years ago. And my dream, like Betsy said, was to be a sports reporter. I wanted to, make it to ESPN and be on Sports Center, be on the sidelines. And I didn't get there, but I got pretty close, getting to work at a network in Cincinnati and be on the sidelines for the Bengals and the Reds and different events throughout, the country too. And so for me, it was a dream come true, but it got to a point where in my personal life, I had a lot of stuff going on that people didn't know, didn't see. During the Bengals Super Bowl run in 2022, I had lost three family members in 3 months. And then, the woman that I thought was going to marry, her and I were going through a really toxic breakup. And it all happened at once. And unfortunately, I was suicidal and had to check into a hospital. And after, spending a couple weeks there and starting to learn about mental health and what it was and realize that a lot of other people struggle with it, I decided to kind of pivot the career and combine the mental health passion that I just found and journalism together. And that's where the idea of the mental game was born. This podcast that I do, where I interview athletes, celebrities, musicians, influencers about mental health to try to break the stigma. Because, as you all know, media is changing every single day. There's new shows, there's new things. You got to be different. I couldn't believe there was nothing like this out there that had gave the athletes in the NFL or celebrities or whoever a platform to just talk about their mental health. You might hear it for 5 minutes on a podcast or 10 minutes on a podcast, but to have a 30-minute or an hour conversation all about mental health, and we sprinkle in some fun and good stories too, but I didn't see it out there. So I started with some of the NFL players that I knew, and then it's grown where, some of these guests that I was just texting Kirk Herbstreit this morning, and he's going to come into our studio in a couple of weeks and come on the show. It's that's all the guests are secret, by the way. So that stays on the Zoom call, but it's crazy that you're able to have opportunities like that. Or, we mentioned social media and I'll get into that, but I'm sitting on my couch one day and I see Terry Crews comments on your video. And I'm like, okay, that's pretty wild. And then he invited me out to his house and we did an hour episode with him. It's just, creating something unique that hasn't been done before. And I think getting back to the journalism skills, I'd never be able to do this if I didn't have the background that I did. One, for the connections and networking, and I'll say that as much as as cliche as it is, you got to know what you're doing, who you know, what you know, that thing. But knowing people does help. Getting able to work with different agents and publicists, and I've just built relationships over the years that have made this really easy to kind of make that swing. But it's been really, really cool. And I never would have predicted it. I wanted to be a sports reporter for that my whole career. And my dream, which I don't know if Betsy knows this or not, when I was a kid, was I wanted to be the host of the Tonight Show, which is pretty bold. But I would stay up and watch Jay Leno every night. And I think I'm doing that, but doing it my own way with my own purpose. And some of the guests I have on are literally on the Tonight Show too. So it kind of feels like a wholesome thing. But yeah, using all those skills from being an MMJ and, working on the sidelines and working in a newsroom, I use them every single day. I mean, I don't have a big agency or production house behind me. It is me. And, I hired a manager 4 months ago. I have a videographer and creative kid that I work with too. But I mean, just numbers wise, if I'm saving like, and hopefully this doesn't scare y'all, but from doing this for a year and a half, or I probably should have spent, if I did it the right way, like you're supposed to do with hiring, production team and marketing and all that stuff, I'd be at over $250,000. I don't have that. So I set up every camera. I book every interview. I edit everything for social media. I am texting back and forth with the guests, making sure the collab post that we're going to do together is like they got everything they want in it. I mean, I bust my ass on this thing. Sorry for cussing, but it's like, it's worth it. I'm passionate about it. And it also like proves too, and I tell the kids that are in my class this, like, you have an opportunity now to create something, and you don't have to go the route that Betsy and I did. I mean, I think it helps, obviously, but like you can start something at 20 years old, start putting clips of it on TikTok, and people just love like the way that you talk about something or your whatever topic it is, it can explode. And so the social media element is like huge, and that stuff has been fun to watch, like just seeing how, and because it's personal to me with mental health, seeing how it genuinely helps people.
One thing I want you to talk about is your 30 days, 30 states
Oh, geez. Yeah.
tour. Because first of all, that's a project right there in and of itself. But your audience, high school kids, college kids, student athletes, that was really your audience that you were hitting. But going back to the social media part, not only did you have these meetings, but you took that content and you spun it onto your social media. So everybody knew what you were doing. Everybody knew that you were on this journey. You talked about what you talked about. You thanked every school, every group that you spoke to, but you really made this not just a tour, but you made it something that you could really use on social media. And we've talked so much, like you mentioned, about content and how important that is, but you got that content out there.
Yeah, it was one of the stupider ideas I've ever had in my life, but it worked out. I thought, 30 states in 30 days, it's possible. It's going to be, I mapped it out for like 2 weeks, and I just realized, okay, if I go do this again, I don't have an agency, big marketing team behind me. I think it would genuinely help people and help grow this organically. And so, yeah, we went to 30 states, 30 days, had 45 events, over 15,000 people showed up. And it was everything from going to a recovery center in Detroit with 20 people to being in an arena with 2 or 3,000 people, or being at a high school or college theater. It was really, really special. And yeah, we filmed everything. And it was really, really cool to put that out. It was a lot of work because you're driving, a stereotypical day. I'll, take you through like 1 week. We started in New York City on Saturday, had a show with Mac Miller's DJ, and some other mental health advocates in New York City. And then by 5 days later, I was on the coast in Florida doing a show in, I don't know where I was in Florida, but somewhere in Florida. But throughout that journey, we hit, like a mental health event, specific event on Saturday. On Sunday, I think I was in Delaware. Yeah, I was in Delaware at a college, and then I was in Virginia at a college. And it was just, you do these events, and it's every single day. You're driving 2 to 4 hours, and then you're having to post the content on all 5 platforms: Twitter or X, whatever, X, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Facebook and LinkedIn, every single day. And you got to put thought into the caption, into the thumbnail. Like, there's just so much that goes into it that people don't see behind the scenes. And I wish, thankfully, Chris didn't put this out there, but I would like cuss my phone out, I would say 3 or 4 days a week, because I'm like, oh, that TikTok not being able to let you edit like things specifically is one of the most annoying things on social media. Like every other app, you can edit the thumbnail, the title. Like if you don't get it right on TikTok, you just hit send and you got to delete it and start over. But yeah, it was just capturing that every day. And like I said, it'd be 20 people in a recovery meeting, all the way up to, 2,000-3,000 people in an arena. And the coolest thing for me, Betsy, and I know you know this, like I would do a free meet and greet after every single show, and it might be 10 people, or some states, I remember Indianapolis, Rhode Island, there'd be 100, 150 people, and they just want to like take a picture, say hi, ask a question about my sports reporter background, mental health. But I mean, I have had one-on-one conversations in the last 6 months with, I would say, easily over 1,000 people. And most times, like when I was a sports reporter, and Betsy, you get this, people would come up and be like, hey, what do you think about Joe Burrow? What do you think about this college football game? Now, 99% of the people that come up to me are asking me or telling me about the worst day of their life, asking for advice, saying how the podcast has helped them. And so it's a lot to take in, but like it works. And then seeing them DM you on social media or post about it, like it worked. And so now on the flip side, like I'm getting booked all over the country because we did that organic tour where I was at Southern Miss a couple weeks ago. I'm going to New York. I'm going to Scranton, Pennsylvania. So I'm a huge Office fan. Like I know people there probably hate like hearing it, but I'm excited to go there. I'm going to Maine in a couple weeks. Like it worked. So that's been the real cool thing is like I just did it organically.
I'll open it up to questions here in just a second, but I want to follow up with you, Brandon, on your guest list. And the more you do it, the more impressive, of course, your guest list gets. But how do you get people, especially people that we know, how do you get them to talk about this? Because as we know, mental health is something that you didn't talk about not that long ago. It was something that you whispered about. You didn't talk
Mm-hmm.
about it. But then we saw like Kevin Love in the NBA come out and talk about his struggles. Even, you can go back 10 or so years when Joey Votto here with the Reds, after his father died, he admitted he was having a hard time. And so he stepped away from the game. And so gradually, people that we know in the media have been talking about this, but how
Yeah.
do you get them to open up the way they do on your podcast?
Well, I'm trying to get Joey on so bad. Him and I had a conversation last year and he told me privately, he just doesn't want to open up about all that yet. And he wants to like, and I'm like, that's fine. I just wanted a reason because I worked with you for 5 years and I just got to know back. So we had a pretty candid conversation. I love Joey. But for me, like the fact I think that helps is one, I've worked in TV and entertainment for 10 years. So that helps with the trust factor. But two, like my whole life story besides my ex-girlfriend's name is on the internet. So like I am just let everything out there where people I think feel safe to like tell it with me. And that's been the really powerful thing is that I would say in over half of the episodes, we get people that admit to something that they have never said publicly. Like Terry Crews had never talked about being in a hotel room, suicidal in New York City, calling his best friend and asking for help. Never told that story before. And so like hearing things like that, but yeah, just making them comfortable and like I'm a storyteller and interviewer. Like that's storytelling is my favorite thing to do. And that's what will separate you in journalism, no matter what form you do. It doesn't matter if you're on, the radio or on social media or on TV, like storytelling is the biggest thing. And so making them feel comfortable, but like, yeah, I mean, when it comes to like outreach, I do it all myself. I mean, I get 95% no's. People on this podcast just see the yeses, but like, it's just about connecting with people, making them feel comfortable. Like it's kind of weird. It's kind of crazy looking at the guest list. Like I never thought I'd have Kevin Gates was crazy. Like not crazy. Like it was a great interview. He's super passionate about mental health. I just didn't think he would be on it. Meredith from The Office, Kate Flannery, but like people have just never been asked about this stuff. Like Kate told me she had never been asked about mental health in an interview, and she gave some of the best therapy advice I've ever heard. I play it in schools and at events all around the country, just talking about sometimes you don't find the right therapist the first time. So shop around. Or Kay Adams, the NFL reporter, kind of said the same thing. It's like dating. It sounds dumb, but it is. You have to find a match, somebody you can talk with. And so, yeah, just making them feel comfortable. That's what I notice. Is just they trust me because of my story that I've been through the shit, the really rough stuff with my mental health. And so they trust me with their story.
Okay, anybody have any questions? Raise your hand. I'll kind of scroll. So
Oh, we're doing manual hand raises. Nice.
yeah, Jack, go ahead.
Hey, Brandon, thanks for taking the time to be with us today. Just your question on storytelling. Um, some advice or on your end at least, when you see a story that you think is really good or really inspires you, how do you apply that to sort of your own life or your own work?
Wow, that's really deep. Feel like I'm in therapy. I have a weird sense of humor, by the way. I think for me, like, I do learn a lot from every single story and every single guest. Some are deeper than others, but like, I just know when I sit there, I don't get starstruck. I don't really like, I've worked with these people my entire life. Now, some of them are a lot more famous than the athletes I worked with, but like you sit there and you go, oh, they go through the same things as me. Oh, this is going to help people if I can take this story and like make it relatable. That's for me is like the whole thing is making their story relatable to the audience, but it also relates, you know, to me. Like Kevin Gates, one of the best things I've ever heard about mental health was, you know, he said like being vulnerable is a strength, not a weakness. Like I took that and like apply it to my life every day, or like I've been more vulnerable in my presentations more than I ever have because like of learning lessons like that while telling Kevin's story. So yeah, I think just taking even some of the advice or you like being inspired by their stories. I mean, it pushes me to do more work too. Like there are days like I want to quit and not do this because the money's not coming in, the guests are saying no, and then Kirk Herbstreit calls me yesterday and wants to come on. Somebody else, just texts me and wants to come on. And that's like, okay, great, I got those wins, but I do learn a lot from just listening, which is super powerful, I think, with storytelling too. And that's when you're interviewing somebody, listening is the biggest thing because you can have your list of questions, but if they mention something about like their mom really randomly in a sentence, hey, like, yeah, that's great, but like, let me backtrack. You just said something about your mom. Why does that pull at the heartstrings so much? Why is that important to you? Then you go down that rabbit hole for 10 minutes because they're going to tell you, well, I lost my mom, or she's struggling right now, or she's sick. And you can use that to tell the story. Sorry, that wasn't like all the way answering, but yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, listening is the most important thing you can do. Ari?
Hi, yeah, hi. Thanks for being on here. We've talked a lot about like interview prep in this class, but I imagine because this is kind of, yeah, an interview more centered around mental health, what do you do to prepare before each guest comes on?
Yeah, I mean, I prep a lot. I'm a weird mix. I say like I can just go in and wing it, but then I do prep a lot when I look back at it. I'll listen to I'll try to find like 2 or 3 other podcasts they've been on so I can listen to like common questions and like know to like, I'll ask a few of them, but like get those out of the way because I want my interview to be unique. But I do my research. Like I'll call people that played with them, or I'll like reach out to a publicist that I know and say, hey, I'm having this celebrity on. What do you know? Like, is there a story that I can tell that they haven't been told yet? Just do a lot of reading, look through their social media, listen to what they say. I'll go on X and type in at their username, type in mental health, type in depression, see if they've ever spoken out about it. I really do dig into their life, but also, before we do the interview, I say, hey, I'll give an example. So Danielle Bradbury won The Voice like 7, 8 years ago. She's a country music singer, and I had her on in Nashville like 6 months ago. And I saw a TikTok of her talking about kind of the same things I went through, like the relationship struggles. And it was the first time I had seen that in her timeline. And I go, okay, she went through a breakup. Maybe that's, and so I heard she had suicidal thoughts before, but I didn't know where it stemmed from. And so I'm talking to her publicist before, and she goes, yeah, she hasn't really talked about the breakup. I know that's affected her. I don't think she wants to talk about it. Can we just avoid that? I said, yeah, sure, fine. And so I sit down. I'm always someone that pushes the envelope, respectfully. But like we sit down before, and I always shoot the shit with them for like 5, 10 minutes, try to make them feel comfortable. Like, hey, are there any things you definitely want to touch on? Definitely things you don't. We'll talk about that. And I'm like, hey, by the way, we don't have to talk about this. Jen and I were talking before, like it can be a touchy subject. That's fine. But I saw your TikTok about a breakup. Like, is that kind of what fueled all this? She's like, oh yeah, yeah. And we can definitely talk about that. Like, I want to talk about that. It's like her publicist probably didn't want her to talk about it, but if Danielle tells me she wants to, then we can. And so that was the first time she had ever talked about her breakup publicly. So like you can do all the prep you want, but then once you hear something or see something, ask about it. And there's sometimes I ask guests like random questions when they mention something during the interview, but in that like 5 to 10 minute window before we start, I give them like the quick synopsis on me, and then just try to make them feel comfortable and see if there's anything they definitely want to push, anything they definitely don't. Also, like buttering people up is like really, really useful. Boost their ego a little bit, make them feel comfortable. You know, when people have something to promote it. Like Kevin had a new album. Some people have new movies coming out. Like, but yeah, no, I just try to make them feel comfortable right away.
All right, thanks. Anybody else? JJ.
So, Brandon, as a content creator, perhaps you probably experienced like thinking this piece of content is gonna go viral or it's gonna perform really well, and the opposite happens. How do you respond to the situations without letting it affect your mental health?
Yeah, it's so weird to me because like some things I'm like, this is a hit, and then it does nothing. And then you have the lead reporter at Entertainment News talking about 5 months ago how Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift are going to get married and it gets 100,000 views. It's like, because of the Taylor Swift effect, that goes. Meanwhile, somebody's telling their suicide, you know, attempt story and it doesn't go. I'm like, yeah, you just gotta the consistency of putting out content. It'll eventually, you know, you'll have some things that have popped. You know, 6 months ago, I had like 8,000 followers on Instagram. Now I'm about to hit 30 because I've had a couple things go. And it's not like I'm not solely focused on the numbers, but they do matter with growth. And so eventually I have like 45 episodes out. I'd say 30 of them, 25 to 30 of them are like recognizable names. Maybe 10 are like everybody should know who they are. And so eventually when I have one of these episodes pop, like I get a hypothetical name, Joe Burrow, that episode gets 500,000 views. People are going to realize there's a bank of all these episodes. And then that's going to carry all of it. So like, that's kind of what motivates me with that. But yeah, it's so random on social media. You never know. Like Terry talking about suicide for the first time ever, that got like 1.4 million views and like 40,000 likes on Instagram. And like, because of the connection we had during the interview and that he's never told that story, like I'm literally messaging Terry the day before, like, hey, can we do a collab with this? Is this like, is the caption good? And he's like, yeah, absolutely, send it. Like, I love that. And so that helps too. But yeah, you never know. It is so wild to me how like I think something's going to go and then it doesn't. TikTok's the weirdest one for sure, because I put out like really good stuff and it'll get like, it gets stuck like at 5 to 800. And then you'll have something that's like kind of silly and it gets like 80,000. I'm like, what the hell is going on? So it's kind of a mixed bag.
Any other questions real quick? Brandon,
I'll
let's,
ask a question.
oh, there you go.
Could I ask a
JJ.
question here, Betsy?
Yeah.
I had a question here, Brandon. This might be getting into the nitty gritty here a little bit. Like, how are you able to keep yourself afloat from a funding standpoint? Because like for basic 101, and I don't mean to like that mean that in like
You're
any
good.
but like it's the podcast realm, and I'm like it's sometimes a little daunting to be like, do I have enough here to be able to put all my chips in on this?
Yeah, it's tough, man. Yeah, it's getting, you know, I'm getting some sponsorships now that help, obviously, but like the sponsorships on the show, or like, you know, I do get paid to speak. So like I'm on the road all the time and that helps, you know, fund what we're doing. But yeah, like here in Cincinnati, I would like in the summer while I was getting ready to go interview like the biggest celebrities I've ever had on, and I was like driving Uber till 4 a.m. on Friday and Saturday nights. And I'd say about 40%, because I was a sports reporter here and I'm from here, I'd say about 40 to 50% of the rides, by the end of the ride, they like recognized me. And it was the most embarrassing thing at the beginning. And it sucked because I'd still have to put in the same hours. I still didn't want to get a real job. I'm like, all right, I'll do this. I can talk to people. But it hurt the ego for sure. But eventually I learned like it's all part of the journey. But yeah, you got to get creative and find ways to stay afloat. Like most people, I'm assuming when they start one, they either have a savings account, which I didn't have because I was a partier, alcoholic, and you know, it really didn't, you know, help my this new career choice. But also like you have to go do it. And for me, it's either do I go get a normal job, or do I drive Uber at night, try to fund this? And so now it's cool because like brands are reaching out to me and wanting me to do events and like I'm speaking at bigger things. And I mean, it's a balancing act. Like it is, you know, we have this, like our margins this thin right now, But that being said, like I'm starting to see the growth. I know the plan. It's just like, dude, you got to get through these next 6 months to a year and you're good. Like I started this, it'll be 2 years in November. I'd say the last year is when I, really focused on the business side and like brought in somebody that's worked at a high level, like in sponsorships and activations at a company. And we just met completely randomly. But yeah, I mean, it's a grind. I mean, like when I say like, I kids joke with me at like things and like say like ask me about my life. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm really famous. I live in my mom's basement in Cincinnati. It's true. I do. But that's part of life. I don't think well, this isn't public, so Betsy doesn't know yet, but like I'm moving to LA in 2 months because I have because the guests, all of them are there or they come there once a year. And so for me, it's been so hard because what I'll do is I'll budget out like a certain amount of money for me to go to LA for a week or 3 days and shoot 9 episodes. Same thing with New York. Those trips cost thousands of dollars. And then it's so hard to organize. Well, dude, rent's this much. So like if I can speak for the next 2 months and save up money and we got these new sponsorships coming in, I can move out there, then it's like a kind of like a circle or a cycle. Like, yes, we got to save up money, but also we got to put out podcasts with bigger people and be where they're at to be able to get bigger sponsorships. Sorry, that's a long answer, but yes, it is a total cluster and really hard to figure out in the beginning. Now I'm starting to learn and be able to stay afloat. I haven't Ubered yet in like 6 months. I'm hoping I don't go back to that, but if I have to, I'll figure it out.
Wait a minute, is that breaking news that you are moving to LA?
Yes, that's not. Yeah, we're gonna have a going away party in like a month and a half, but like I was looking around to see if anyone in the office was sitting by me and they're not. So I told like 4 people here now.
Wow. How about that? Well, I mean, you're right. You got to go where they are.
Yeah, just so I get emails or texts like, so Tyrann Mathieu, for instance, he played at LSU, plays for the Saints now, super famous NFL player, hit me up, wanted to come on, thought I lived in LA, and he was in LA that week. It's like, that happens every single week from an agent, publicist, or an athlete, celebrity. And you just have to be there because this stuff's very spontaneous. And so if they're like, yeah, I'm in LA this week, you got to be there. So yeah, that's kind of the main thing. It's going to be a grind financially. I'll be eating PB&Js, but I'll figure it out.
Back in college, go to the ramen noodles. You know?
Jeez, yeah.
I know sometimes you got to do that. So, anybody else have a question real quick?
Yeah, I just wanted to hop on real quick. First, thanks for being with us today. This is awesome, man.
Sure.
But I was just wondering, like, when you have different like celebrities on, right? There's obviously a lot of different areas. You have different ages from like, your Terry Crews to somebody in college versus like different industries. You have singers, you have athletes. How do your questions vary depending on like those two specifically?
Yeah. It kind of goes back to the research, like the research interview prep where I just, I try to learn as much about them as possible. And I know, like, so a technique that I do is I always ask 2 things each episode. First question is, what does mental health mean to you? Because I can kind of like set the stage for people listening who might not know who they are, like where their journey's at with their mental health. And the end is like advice to somebody that wants to, be like you or go through this field. But for me, I like give myself like kind of 8 to 10 topics and I text them to myself the night before. I read them again right before I do the interview. And then I have no notepad. I have nothing. I just have everything up here. And so it's just knowing the guest really, really well, listening, knowing that you can pivot. But yeah, it's unique to the guest and like knowing, like reading them during the interview and knowing, hey, they're about to get deep or like, man, like when people cry, that's the best content. So it's like, I'm not saying I'm trying to make people cry, but I'm trying to make people cry because it is like, I just want them to feel comfortable and open up, and it does give the best content. But yeah, it varies. The things that I'm going to ask Terry about Hollywood, I'm not going to ask Coach Taylor from the Bengals. But like I've been in Coach Taylor's world for 10 years, so I know all about the day-to-day routines inside of a locker room and inside of a stadium. But like, yeah, so they vary, between the two or between all types of guests, but just a consistent theme of wanting to tell their story and get them to be as honest and open as possible. That's really the goal for me at the end of the day.
I was laughing when you were talking about making them cry, because I do the same thing. Like when you're doing an interview and they start tearing up, and you're looking at them and you're going, yeah, but inside, you're going, yes, yes. My claim to fame is I got Santa Claus to cry one time on an interview.
Jeez.
How about
That's
that?
amazing. That's amazing. Oh my God.
That is my claim to fame. I got Nancy Lopez to cry because I asked her about Arnold Palmer, and then I got Santa Claus to cry because I was asking him. I said, what story that a kid has told you sitting on your lap? What story really touched you? And he just started bawling, and I'm going,
Oh my God. That's incredible.
I
Well,
know.
I'll say this, and I mentioned it with the tour at the meet and greet. Like, I can't do it because of HIPAA and some of the people being minors, and I just want to respect people's privacy. But whatever you can think is the worst thing that could ever happen to a person, I have heard it all, from sexual assault to suicide attempt to like abuse at home. I hear that every single day, and we do a really good job. My manager does, is working in the contracts at like high school has their counselors, college has their psychology department, nonprofit has resources there. I have people every single day that are at these events that are actively suicidal. I've never told anybody, and then we work to get them in therapy right away. And work with the nonprofits, the therapists that are there. So that's like powerful for me. I'm not gonna cry like now, but like that's what hits me when this is happening. It's like, I remember Indianapolis, we had like 6 kids at a high school that were actively suicidal, never told anybody. It's like, holy shit. Like, if these are the kids coming up to me, imagine how many aren't. And so just being able to have that message, I think, can help a lot.
Well, and for you, once you hear these stories, you almost feel a responsibility to do something. You have to help them somehow.
Yeah, and I can't be there every day, and I tell them that all the time. It's like, look, you can listen to the show. I probably won't see your DMs, and like and I'm not your therapist. So like I can help you right now in this 5 minutes we're talking, but you have to rely on the resources that are here. And also, like, this isn't why I came on to talk, but at Notre Dame, I know for a fact, obviously in sports, around the sports programs, they have so many, mental health professionals now, especially, since the world's kind of changed with that. I know Coach Freeman from his time at Cincinnati. I remember I was tracking his flights and sitting at the airport when all this stuff was going on when he was going to Notre Dame and interviewing at LSU. But just for on campus, you have free therapy. So if you're ever going through something, I don't know what the resource is, but search it on Notre Dame's website after this. 99% of colleges included in your tuition fees is therapy and mental health services. Take advantage of it because it can get really expensive once you get out.
Yeah, good point. Any other questions real quick? Yeah, Maddie.
Thanks for being on today. I just had a quick question that came to mind when you mentioned like a manager. So kind of building your brand within social media and kind of taking off. How are you making sure that you have, the right leadership behind you who's going to support the mission of your kind of podcast, but not almost quote unquote sell you out, I guess, in a way? Like, I guess, was that hard kind of finding representation? And is that like an ongoing thing for you?
Yeah, I had somebody that reached out and had me on, found me on TikTok like a year ago. And I worked with that person for like 3 months, and it was a complete disaster behind the scenes. And so I had to like legality stuff involved with money. Like, it was not fun. And so finding EJ, he's my manager now, like it really, really like was organic. I mentioned Mac Miller's DJ before. Like, one of my really good friends discovered Mac on MySpace in 2009. And so he has this amazing like creative space in Cincinnati that really feels like LA, where we shoot commercials. My show, there's a music studio. Like, before Mac passed, he'd be in here. Jack Harlow's been in here. Different, musicians when they're in town or touring come in here and record. But yeah, it was really, really hard. Like, this is me. This is my story. It's personal, not just a business. Like, it's literally my life story. And so it is hard to trust people. But EJ and I have a really good connection. I like have creative control over everything. Like, we're not a big agency. He really handles like my speaking engagements, the brand partnerships. He checks with me. Like, there's a certain brand that wants me to be a spokesperson for me or for them. And that's great. But they want me to like they want to say like, hey, we want our brand to be all over social media. When people go to your story or go to your profile, they have to know you're our, partner. And it's like, yes, but people like my content because it's genuine. So like we have to find a way to compromise on that contract so that they get what they want, but it's also not hurting me by like spamming people with their logo and their ad. And so, for example, my creative idea was, look, I'm a storyteller. It's a healthcare brand. And I just go, they want to do 3 videos over 3 months. Why don't, instead of doing some like promoting all their stats and how they help people, they have adolescent department, adult department, and then like I don't know the word, starts with a G. It means like like older people. Sorry. I don't know. I'm dumb. But anyway,
Yeah.
I said,
Yeah,
why don't we,
geriatric.
yeah. Why
Yeah.
don't we, I said, EJ, if you can have them identify 3 patients, one in each category that has an inspiring mental health story that this organization or this company has helped them, let's tell their stories. And that'll get way more likes and way more traction than us talking about how they have the best hospital in the country. Like we can add that in there. But so yeah, for me, like you talk about selling out, like I'm not just gonna take, a considerable amount of money to post about a company and not make it authentic to me, because what I see works is the authenticity. Or like like I will post something on my story about like, a year ago I checked into a hospital, or something about mental health, or a story that I heard, and that gets way more traction than, some of the like brand stuff that I put out. So yeah, but I have complete control. Like when I say I literally, like we have you have a pitch deck that you send to companies that like outlines your entire brand. Like when I get off this call, I'm going to finish our new one and send it to EJ as he starts to send out, it's new brands. But yeah, I mean, it's really key to have somebody that aligns with you, because behind your back, they could like commit you to money that like they could commit you to a contract that you can't fulfill. Like that's what happened to me. I had somebody that, and this isn't me talking shit, this is just how the reality of the business, like somebody contracted me to do work that like was impossible for me to fulfill, but I had a legal obligation to do it. And so like that whole stuff, I won't bore you with it, but it can happen. So your question is super valid. Thank you.
Anybody else real quick? Oh, Shannon, go ahead.
Hi, thank you so much for being here and chatting with us today. I was just kind of looking through some of your different titles and different guests that you've had on, and I was just kind of wondering, when do you find the moment to be right, when you decide to jump in and do a podcast where you just talk, versus when you're trying to get guests? And I'm sure some of that has to do with some of the scheduling. So I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I was so like dependent on guests for a long time. And then like I would realize in journalism, you're taught to never make the story about you. Like you always want to tell your guest story, or the featured, the story that you're talking about, the team, the player, the athlete. And then I realized I had a couple TikToks that went viral, and it's just about me. And I'm like, oh, people are feeling a connection with like my journey. So I had people at shows come up and tell me that too. And so it's like, all right, there can be certain times where I can talk about like things in my life, like me getting sober or being a year sober, or, I think when my dog died, I like did a solo one just because it's something that people go through. And I'm like, that was my buddy. Like it's tough sometimes. So for me, it's a balance of like, we go back to the other question from Maddie just a second ago of it's, like my manager told me you should do 1 solo episode a month, because people connect with you and they're able to help you with your brand. And I'm like, or they're able to help, like they want to hear your story. And so I'm like, okay, I've never thought about that before, but I think it'll do well because we can clip those. Again, going back to social media, you can take those little clips and put them on Instagram, put them on TikTok, and that might do better than some of the celebrity interviews that JJ was talking about, where I think they're going to go crazy. By the way, I'm cheating looking at names and people turn their cameras off. But anyway, it's like, yeah, it's a balance. I think for me, being dependent on guest interviews is a struggle sometimes when you're not in LA or New York, and people like your personal story. And so I think just talking that one thing we're going to try, and this is going to be unique. Like, do you guys watch Theo Vaughn or listen to his podcast at all? Like and other people do this too. Like they have call-ins. And so we're going to start like a call-in line where people just kind of tell their story a little bit. And I think that will be powerful because I've seen it on other platforms where it works. So yeah, just I don't know, whenever I feel something, I'll record it and talk about it. I've realized at work, kind of like what I put on my Instagram story, people relate to it. I just want to, sometimes it's planned. Like we're in Nashville in 3 weeks for a celebrity golf event where like one of our partners is setting us up, and like we're getting like, it's going to be sick. Where we have like a side room with the studio and we're going to get like 5 guests filtered in, but I'm going to do a solo episode that week so that I have less responsibility on social media while I'm doing this event.
Any other questions? You mentioned about being on, especially Instagram, and getting kind of immediate feedback. You are very, very honest. And I'm not sure that I would be that brave to be that honest. I'm not sure that a lot of people would be that brave to be that honest, but you tell your story. You mean, you go back to high school and you tell your story. Was that difficult for you to actually get in front of a camera and know that thousands of people are going to see this?
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. Like there's some things that I haven't even like talked about publicly that still like I want to one day. But like I'll give you an example, and sorry to be very direct, but we're all college age here. Like what started everything, my first suicidal thought when I was 14 is like, this is before Snapchat and all that stuff. Like I sent a picture to a girl, she sent me like 20. I never told anyone, shared anything with anyone. And at a football game, she sent it to the whole school while I was in the front row. Most like horrifying thing could ever happen to a 14-year-old. Didn't want to tell that story publicly, never wanted to talk about it. And then I started working with doctors and like psychiatrists and learning that this is like one of, if not the most common reasons kids from high school and college take their own life, because a photo gets sent around Snapchat or posted on social media, or someone's like from overseas. It sounds crazy, but it does happen, like sextortion, where like someone from overseas is like threatening to like post it to their mom, send it to their mom, or post it on Facebook if they don't send them $500 right now. And most teen suicides from the people that I've worked with that are way smarter than me have told me are very instantaneous, where like within 3 hours of that happening, a kid takes their own life. And so once I started having kids come up to me and tell me that that's happened to them or their friend, and then working with the doctors and the foundation or the prevention advocates that have told me those same things, I go, yeah, I got to talk about it. I have to tell that story because it could save life. Like where I tell kids, nothing's the end of the world. Feelings are temporary. It might seem like it's like, that moment doesn't affect me anymore. Like I got through it. You can too. And so that was something that was really, really hard for me to open up about. But yeah, I mean, you talk about me being honest. I talk about the worst day of my life every single day. And so that is tough. But then you see how it can help people and how it can grow positively on social media. It's really, really powerful. And that's why I do it.
I had mentioned to you earlier that we have several student athletes in this class. Talk about the challenges that student athletes, that you have heard from student athletes, that, just getting through school, and now you've got the extra of whatever your sport is, and you have practices, and you have this and you that, and you have the grades that have to be up. Some of the challenges that you have heard, some of the student athletes that you have met along the way, what have you heard?
I mean, there's more pressure on student athletes and just people in life than ever before with social media and with the way things are grinding out. But like also people are talking about their mental health and like addressing it way more than before. That's what I give like the high school and college generations that are there now. It's like they're talking about stuff that I never talked about. You never talked about, Betsy. Like in the locker rooms, it's completely changed. 10 years ago when I would walk in the Bengals locker room, no one talked about mental health. Or I walked on a college campus, no one would. I have no idea if they had a team psychiatrist or anything like that. Now, like I know that teams do, college athletic programs do, especially at a school like Notre Dame. You guys have the best resources in the world to take advantage of them if you're a student athlete. And this advice can kind of, and this is what I've learned too from other people. Like I'm, friends or worked with people like, Tyler Boyd He drops a catch to lose a game. And this guy literally gets 10,000 tweets when he gets back to the locker room, calling him a piece of shit and that they lost in the game and all this stuff. It's like, you just can't let that stuff affect you. Who cares what somebody says about you? And it's just about athletes, just life in general, what I've learned from my guest. One, we all struggle, but two, who cares what someone says about you on social media? Like, you know, all the hard work that you put in and what you care about, and they don't love you. They don't care about you. So who gives a shit? Like, that's what I've learned, but also like realizing that when you need to take care of it, knowing like warning signs, and also knowing, like setting boundaries for yourself is huge. Like, I can only handle this much. Like, you can tell your coach, like, hey, we have these 2 projects coming up. Like, look, it's off season lifting. Like, I want to do it, but like, can I make up for this day next week or on Saturday? Like, just setting those boundaries for yourself so that you don't get burnout, so that you know, like, you have a routine. It's okay. Like, before, people wouldn't ask for that. Now people are like accepting of that, it seems like.
Any other questions? Yeah, JJ.
I was also wondering, given that you've been on TV and on social media, but also publicly speaking, what do you feel is like the biggest difference you find between making content as a reporter on TV, as a content creator on social media, and perhaps public speaking?
The difference between the 3? Yeah, TV, you're like, and this helps me with what I do now, you have a deadline every single day. You have no option. I missed slot, so I didn't get my report in 1 time in 5 years. And it was because I was at a ski resort and the internet sucked. And I was doing a really cool story on like these guys doing tricks in the park. And the internet screwed me. But like having the deadlines every day, you have no option. Like, you have to get done at 6, you have to get done at 11. So like, schedule your interviews around that, be at practice around that, edit everything. I mean, there has been times, I'm sure Betsy's done this too, where I've gone on TV with literally just like the video attached and ad-libbed a 4-minute sportscast before. Like, it is, I don't recommend it, but like knowing how to go on the fly, that was like having those deadlines and structure. That's different than like what I do now with the podcast. Like, I can have somebody on for 10 minutes. I can have them on for an hour and a half. I control all the content. I own all the content. You know, getting back to the question before, again, cheating that Jacob asked, it's like, we are in the process of piloting a curriculum for high school students where we are taking the podcast, and it's a 15-week program that takes like a theme for the week. Like, you're not alone. Feelings are temporary, different things. And like, the teachers can lead group activities, but it's me and Terry Crews, like clips from that. I own it, so I can do whatever I want with it. And so we're able to monetize off that. And we're, doing a corporate structure for HR departments too. Like, I never would have guessed that would have been a line of income when I started this, but I had really smart people around me that were like we just met a assistant principal, or someone that was a principal for 20 years in high school. And she's like, you should do a curriculum. I'm like, I have no idea. And she's like, you have all the content already. That's the hardest part. Let us take it and put it in a system. So sorry to sidetrack on that question. So I can do whatever I want on social media, and with, I own all my content. I'm my own brand. So like, having that control is great. The public speaking is like, I just like didn't like it when I was on TV, because like there's so many more people than are in a studio with you. Now I love it because it's the most intimate time I can have with somebody. I never understood like what comedians or musicians would talk about like, they'd play an arena or they'd play like a big theater. They'd be like, I miss the small venues. Like, I want to, like, you can see everybody. It's like, I've experienced that now. Like, we did one at LSU's arena, and somebody in the 300 level is asking me a question. I can't even see their face. And so being able to have like that personal connection and like one-on-one, I love that the most in person.
Anything else before we wrap it up? Brandon, we talked a lot here in the class about being able to do what you want to do and following your passion. We had Ruth Riley on a class or two ago, and Ruth Riley was talking about how she was able to take her notoriety, her fame as a basketball player, and really turn it into having a platform for some of her issues, like food insecurity is one of her issues, and overseas getting young girls and young women to embrace the game of basketball as a way to get out of poverty, as a way to strengthen themselves, both mentally and physically. So she admitted using her platform in basketball to be able to really follow her passions. You have done that. You have now created your passion, and you have created a way that you can actually make a living out of it. Talk about how it's so important, especially for, our college students. A lot of them already are doing content. A lot of the students in this class already are doing interviews, they're doing podcasts, they're doing blogs. So they're churning out the content. But how do you take that content and make it your passion?
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult. I mean, like I said, the first year and a half, and I'm still like, I'll be honest with, I've been about as honest as you can be on this call. Sorry for cussing. But like, it's still a challenge. Like, I know I'm getting a certain amount of money from a sponsor at this date, but like, I don't know what's going to happen after that. I'm moving to LA. I got like all these expenses and bills. Like, I don't know what's going to happen. So it's still a struggle. But what I know is like, I figured out what works. And when you figure out what works and what goes and be consistent with it, it's huge. And so like seeing how things lead to, like, for example, me following that passion, I texted Sam Hubbard, he plays for the Bengals, when I had this idea and said, hey, I want to try this out. And he invited me to his house the next week in the summer before the season, and we did it. And I wanted his honest feedback. And he's like, I like it. I think it could really go. If I never texted Sam and asked for that, I'd never be doing this. And so like taking that first step, taking that chance, and knowing that it's going to be a grind, it's hard, man. It is so hard. Like I got here at 8:30. I'll probably leave here at midnight, and I'll do the same thing the next 2 days. I'll be here Saturday, Sunday, recording stuff, doing ad reads, doing the next episode. But like when you're passionate and you care and you can see that, like you can see like that sun on the horizon or whatever of, all right, I'm this close for it being consistent, then it's worth it. But it does take time. So you have to find something that's unique. There's a million people doing podcasts. Like if I did a sports podcast, people would listen, sure, but it would like not be nearly as powerful as I'm doing now. A mental health podcast, it's just me talking or interviewing doctors. Like I get it. This is hopefully doesn't sound egotistical. People ask to come on the show all the time. And I'm like, not like in my head, or I turned to EJ, I go, not to be rude, but like, why do they think that like this is their platform? Like I have to be consistent with my guests at this level because that's why people listen. And so finding your passion, finding it unique, how to make it unique and being consistent with it, I think is really the key. But I mean, I'll be honest, even if you go in TV or radio or do this right out of college, you are going to struggle to start. Like you're going to get better, but financially it's going to be tough. I'm 30 and it's like, it's still a grind, but yeah.
And that's the difference. You'll put up with the grind if it's your passion and if you can see where this can take you. So,
Yep.
Brandon, if anybody wants to follow up, where can they check out the podcast, get in touch with you?
Yeah, The Mental Game, just search that on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, any podcast platform. I'd say like iTunes, Spotify are obviously the biggest audio wise, but I love shooting everything on camera. And I should have said why, because the social media aspect. If you start a podcast and you don't record it video wise, you're doing yourself a huge disservice. That is how you market yourself, the emotions on people's faces, the clips, like, you have to record video. I teach a class at Cincinnati where like before, and this isn't knocking the teacher before, but like it was very audio focused. Audio is important, but even if it's just Zoom video, like I want it to look way better than Zoom video. I do all my episodes in person because it makes a difference with networking, video quality. You control it all. But if you don't do video, you're doing yourself a disservice. That's free marketing. You clip stuff from every single episode, and that's what can propel you to get the next guest, to be able to get that sponsorship. Like you have to do video. But yeah, just find it all over social media. We're doing, I episodes again, starting they come out every Tuesday. Just dropped one with Huey Mack, who was like, you know, when I was in college, got pretty big in the rap scene. Couple different BC listeners coming up. And then when I moved to LA, that's going to be a game changer.
I know. I can't wait for that.
You want to pay my bills?
Well, you know what? Hey, you never know what sponsor is going to be interested in that. So
I will say
hope
this. Can I add one more thing? I'm sorry.
Sure.
Like a year ago, I had an interview, like a 3-hour interview with one of the biggest production houses in the world. Like they do Bieber, Kevin Hart, Elton John, all that stuff. And they just said no. But like I got there. And so sometimes you have moments where it's like proof of concept where it makes a difference and you know you're on the right track. So like even if you're always self-validating, eventually you do get moments like that where it's like, holy cow, like these are the guys that literally, like I look on Instagram and like they're posting with Bieber or Kevin Hart, like they run their production companies and they thought my idea was good. Okay, I'm on to something. So like you have little wins like that sometimes.